Update 7 was released yesterday, and I've got to say, it's a small but game-changing update, but it's a little hard around the edges. So let's talk about everything that's in Update 7, the new stuff, the bugs, and more importantly, is it worth checking out right now? And if you're wondering my answer without having to skip to listen to all the information in between, then bearing in mind that it is in experimental at the moment and it's still being worked on, then the answer's no. Don't download Update 7, and it's not because I want to keep it to myself. Update 7 and the blueprints that come with it are both great and terrible. Let's get into it. So, before we talk about the juicy blueprinting stuff, let's talk about the additions. Firstly, the new game modes. We have passive mode, retaliation mode, where creatures only respond to you once you've provoked them, and then normal mode. These can be selected at any point in the Advanced Settings tab in the menu. This is a great addition to the update and alone would be worth the download. And yes, now you're probably saying, why did you say it isn't worth downloading? Well, hold your horses. This update is like a rough diamond. We've also received a buff to the zipline, which allows us to speed up its speed by holding sprint. Again, a nice little addition, and we also have the conveyor ceiling mounts. These are unlockable in the Awesome Shop, and they look great and are so useful, not to mention the ability to actively change the support for conveyors and pipes depending where we shift our cursor to. And this does actually bring me to my first big peeve about heading to experimental. For the majority of players I've spoken to, if you have the conveyor open in your build tool, the gameplay immediately dumps a huge amount of frames, taking me from a comfortable 50 plus FPS to less than 15, and this is in 90% of the use cases in my save. I almost considered opening a dedicated server with low.ms to gain extra frames in my gameplay, like we mentioned in our dedicated server video. I'll put a link in the top right hand corner now. And by using the link in the description and the code TotalXclipse at checkout, we can get 20% off the first month. However, I then found out that specifically Update 7 on experimental is even worse for dedicated servers. Apparently dedicated servers are currently crashing often, so I wouldn't recommend moving your smooth running Update 6 servers to Update 7 just yet. And speaking of smooth, if you thought that segue was smooth, let me know in the comments below. Now, don't confuse me saying this for knocking on Coffee Stain. I love the update, but it's experimental and the problems above are probably the worst part of the update, and I'm sure this will change in the next few patches. The team are no doubt working hard to fix the update as quickly as possible. But you should know that this update, as it currently stands, isn't for everyone, and there's more to the update. As mentioned prior, overclocking has changed slightly to allow power generators overclocking and underclocking them into a linear fashion, and they've also lowered the exponential power cost change for all buildings. This means that overclocking is less expensive than it was before, and underclocking is not quite as cheap in terms of power consumption. And those pesky nuclear power plants now consume water at a linear rate too, so they'll consume exactly 600 water per minute at 250% overclock, and be consuming 240 water at 100% clock speed. Another change is the alien DNA capsules, which can be produced from those oh so passive creatures walking around, and it allows us to sync these DNA capsules in the Awesome Sync for extra coupons, which run separate to the normal Awesome Sync points, which will be great for getting extra coupons in the early game, or if you've been playing throughout in the late game now. Another small but rather interesting addition, and one that shouldn't be forgotten, is that foundations have new snapping points, which I can't help but think will soon deserve their own video, as I'm sure it will change entirely how we attempt to do curves and how we can potentially do them with the blueprinter. And then, speaking of blueprints, we have the blueprint designer, and I wanted to say that they've implemented this perfectly into the game. Unfortunately though, blueprints are not. It's close, but they do bring with them a handful of bugs and several crashes. That being said, I think the way that they have added the blueprints into the game is fantastic and works great, but you may suffer from the occasional crash. Yesterday I probably had 10 crashes. This was mainly being me unaware that pipes were causing a bit of an issue when copying them across. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. And some members of my community have said that they haven't experienced this issue themselves, but I think it's too much of a coincidence that every time I crashed, or most times, was with pipes. It's also worth bearing in mind that railways cannot be copied and pasted currently, because if you mix the blueprinted railways with the non-blueprinted ones, they cause crashes as well. And sometimes, of course, the game will just crash randomly. Also, if you're wondering if you can play with mods in Update 7, currently you can't. The SML is down for that, and you will crash trying to get into it. But it is experimental. You should expect this. And I definitely feel it's important to go into the update with your eyes open to all of this. There's also bugs that make conveyors go crazy if you delete blueprinted elevators. And don't even attempt to use floor holes with elevators, because things will get just as trippy, if not worse. And from time to time, you'll notice that various items in your inventory are not being returned once you've refunded them from deleting a whole build. Now, I'm not hating on this update, don't confuse me for this. I am genuinely so happy with what we have, but it's just there's a lot of caveats to work with. And I don't think a lot, or the majority of the players would want to play around with that. I'm sure they would rather wait for it to be improved at least a little bit prior to giving it a go. Let's be honest, no one wants to belt a factory at sub 5 frames per second. Not even BL Andrew. But I promise you, if you do wait, it will most definitely be worth it. That being said, if you do want to jump into it, by all means do so. I'm not stopping you, but do back up your saves and prepare for a janky experience. It'll still be fun, but please, if you do notice any odd bugs that aren't already aware, another one, hoverpacks aren't working on railways at the moment, do let the devs know on the QA site of these bugs and crashes. The more information they have on it, the better it's going to be for us all. But guys, if you did appreciate my honesty, do hit the thumbs up and share it with others. And I'll also be releasing some of my own blueprints for you to try out once you're ready to delve into the update in my future videos. So obviously, if you don't want to miss out on that, don't forget to subscribe. And of course, if you do want to see Update 7 prior to jumping in it yourself, then join me on stream. I've already played 10 hours in Update 7, so regardless of how I feel about it, there's no going back for me. I'll just try to keep placing belts to a very minimum at the moment. But guys, there we are. Thanks does go to all of our amazing supporters, most notably our Solar Eclipse patrons, James Irwin and Firefless, as well as our Lunars, the Calamity, Ben and Star, and our Blood Moon of the day, which today is the Souchan Husky. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.